there, welcome back to the Woodcrafting Place. Ray Ruthin here. So we've got a great project for you today. So let's grab our coffee and get to it. Okay, so it's assembly time. We're going to use a glue and nail assembly. It's belt and suspenders. I know that I want this box to go together and never come apart. Glues sometimes have a tendency to crystallize over years. I made a desk when I was in 8th grade that 30 years later, almost every glue joint just completely crystallized and all the pieces came apart. So the glue I'm using to make life easy for myself is type on extend wood glue. Extend meaning I have extended open time for gluing it together. I think this gives you up to 30 minutes of open time, depending on temperature and humidity and all that. A little expensive. If you don't have it and it's one project, don't go out and buy this. Elmer's white glue will work just fine. Any project is perfectly fine. You're going to spread it out evenly and thin on the surfaces that need it. Make sure it goes on both surfaces. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue it up first, and then I'm going to use a drive nail, which you can't really see, but it has a little spiral on it. So when this drives in, it twists, and it really does a great job. Now because of the size of this nail, which is a lot bigger, let's see if we can get one here. That's a standard brad nail. So the nails are going in through here. And what I've already done is I've already drilled a hole through here and here. So this is a much easier time getting through the wood and will be less prone to cracking. The brads go through pretty easy, but something this large really needs a little bit of clearance to get through there without cracking this. Considering how close I am to the edge of that wood, there's a high probability it will crack. So, very important step for any assembly, dry fit. Always take your project, put it together, dry without any glue. Find any fit issues, pieces that don't go together. Make sure you can get it together. I take a square, make sure that the two opposing corners, and you can even use your clamp for the dry fit. I highly recommend it. It's a dry run, basically, of what you're going to need to do. Practice. It'll make it faster when the time comes to do the final fit up. And once you put the glue on there, you're on the clock. Very limited in time. So there we go. And how tight do you clamp it? Clamp it just enough to see the bead of glue ooze out in the corners. Take a square, and I look at two opposing. Let's make this so that you can see it. There we go. I take my square, and I will check one corner square, and as long as the diagonal opposing corner is square, right there, I know the box is square. Another little trick for verifying if your box is good and square and ready to go, even if you do not have a square, you can take a tape measure measuring corner to corner, corner to corner. If those two diagonals are the same, your box is square. Now I know my bottom fits well. It's going to go in there nicely. We're ready to go. I don't spend a lot on clamps. Discount hardware store, discount tool store, a couple bucks each. They come with a rubber pad. I pretty much use them for everything. The only time I need anything different is when I go up to a bigger project like a piece of furniture. In that case, I buy the clamp kit that goes on a piece of pipe to keep the cost down, because wood clamps are pretty expensive. So, alright, so here we go. We got all the pieces ready. And the other thing about the extend glue, the nice thing is it gives you so much time. You can properly get all the pieces together. There's no panic, no urgency. I don't try to squeeze it directly out of the bottle onto my project. I found that that typically just creates a huge mess. Instead, I use popsicle stick, wooden stir. So I'll put a little on a piece of paper nearby. This bottle's almost empty. There we go. Don't dispense too much, because that's all waste now, whatever I don't use. Can't really put it back in the bottle. Now, like I said, glue's out, you're on the clock. The other thing you want to have ready to go is a wet paper towel or a rag. Soaked, ready to go. This glue is water soluble, water cleanup. That's the reason I use it on wood projects, instead of something like a resin, which is not, and you would need to have solvents, and you're on a much shorter timetable. So, I'm going to take my stick. There she is, glued up now. Don't know if you can see that, but there's the glue ooze that I was talking about. So we're going to take this, and we're going to wipe that off. And we're going to get to that quickly. And anywhere else that might have oozed some, I felt a little there. Now, doesn't look exactly square, so let's check. It is not. Alright, so we need to adjust a little. So we'll loosen Loosen the clamps if it's not perfectly square. The other great thing about the extend glue is it gives you time to do this. There we go. We just moved everything just a tiny bit. Now what I'm going to do, since we're glued, is I'm going to take this, put it right there, to pull that in. Don't need to make these really tight, just so that you have a solid face-to-face joint and squeeze out any extra glue. One last check. Hold it nice and tight, and there you have it. I realize you can't see that, but there he is, nice and square. And now we wait. Project's ready to go. Clamped up. Glue. Give it up to an hour. Finish drying. All the glue is dry. So we'll take off our clamps. We'll put these down to the side. Just a smidge of glue oozed out on the bottom. Just take some 220 paper, a couple spots there. There you go. Completely glued box ready for getting our nails. So you've gone through all the trouble to get this nice box that's sanded smooth and scratch free and ready to finish. And now we're going to put some nails in. A little bit of precaution at this point will keep you from putting any dents or scratches in it. A lot of the guys that I talk to all the time, they spend a lot of great care and effort to make sure it's cut square, it's smooth, it's sanded perfectly, and that only to get caught with a scratch that comes up during the finishing process. So as you remember, we're going to use these little knurled drive screws, and to assure that I get a scratch-free installation, it's supported properly, I'm taking a piece of wood that's as big or bigger to put underneath it, and it's got to be nice and clean, no pieces of grit or dust or nails or anything on top of this, because if there's any small pieces of grit on here, I'll get dents in here, and those dents will transfer directly over and show up in my finish. If I'm using stain, it stand right out. So as long as the bottom piece is as big or bigger, it won't dent this piece. The reality is what will happen is the edges may dent the support piece a little bit. And that's my sacrificial scrap piece, so I don't care. So I put my nails in. Now, if you have one, and you decide to use something like this, which is perfectly acceptable, and for the right kind of assembly, these are great fasteners. You can either use a straight pin, or in this case, this is a dual-purpose stapler as well for strength. For a utilitarian piece like this, you use a stapler. There's nothing wrong with those, and normally I would probably use this instead, but for demonstration purposes, we're just using nails. So there you have it, ready to be finished. No dents. Good to go. So we're going to go select the final assembly, clamp marks, what have you. They show up. Alright, we're ready to go. So, next is we're going to do our finishing. I invested in these basic disposable nitrile gloves to discount hardware store a while back for finishing, and these are great. I avoid getting a lot of finish on my hands, and once it sticks to my hands I go to handle things, the finish gets in the project. So there's all kinds of finishes on the market. They come in brushable, they're sprayable, they wipe on with cloth. From ease of application to the most time-consuming oils, this is walnut oil. I really like walnut oil on anything that's going to come in contact with food or kitchen utensils. Mineral oil, great for cutting boards. Both of these are somewhat interchangeable. If you have concerns about allergic reactions on the nut oil, the walnut oil, this is actually it's a cooked off oil, so I've never heard of allergic reactions. However, better safe than sorry. Mineral oil, never heard of an allergic reaction for mineral oils. So both food safe. In reality, all the finishes on the market today are safe once they're cured. Wouldn't recommend trying to drink any of these finishes in this state, but they're completely reacted once they're in a cured state and will not contaminate food. So after that, the next option is a water-based finishes. Here I have a polyurethane, which is a water-based version of standard polyurethane. Great thing about this are A, it cures faster. B, it's soap and water cleanup. There's a little less smell to it than your polyurethane, so it's not as irritating working with it. The oil base also comes with a wipe-on version, so that you use a cloth instead of a brush. After the water base, I would go to this. It goes on thinner than the brush-on does. It's meant to go on thinner because it's wipe-on. It's a little easier to handle. From there, you go to the standard polyurethane. This will go on thicker, give you more protection. If it's something like a tabletop, it's going to get a lot of wear and tear. You're going to want to consider this. And a lot of guys really like lacquer for a real deep shine in their finish. Lacquer is not quite as hard a finish as a polyurethane does, so it's not as good for something like a tabletop. However, a box that's going to sit on top of a dresser or a table, lacquer is a great finish to get a deep, full luster and shine to your finish. Now, after you've applied several coats of your finish, whether it be polyurethane or even a lacquer, you may get little nibs, little rough spots in it. What you want to do is you want to use some 4/0 steel wool to rub it out. This will pull up all those nibs and leave you with a good, smooth surface. And then lastly, Once it's completely finished, anywhere from 1 to as many coats to lacquer. Lacquer is great because every coat literally melts into the previous coat. So you can do 10 coats of lacquer. And each one gives you just a little better, thicker finish. Polyurethane, on the other hand, goes layer on top of layer, and they're actually all separate individual layers. So there is a diminishing return, and they will start to have problems sticking to each other. The last thing, for a good final set of protection on something, you can use a paste wax. Wipe it on, leave it for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and buff off the stuff on top, the stuff that's not completely cured, to give you a nice, smooth, protective coating on top of whatever finish you choose. So I'm going to use the water base, easy to use, quick drying. Use your basic cheap old brush. My rule on brushes are, you buy the cheapest you can, 99-cent brush, use it once or twice, you toss it. That way you will always have fresh brushes rather than spending a lot of money on a $5 or $10 brush, which always needs attention, right? So we'll apply that now. A couple other good notes to keep in mind for using polyurethane or any of these finishes. You've been to the paint store, bought a gallon of paint. It's really convenient to have them shake up the paint. When you're using a clear finish like a polyurethane, you do not want to shake that. You want to stir. What will happen is, with things like polyurethane, you get a lot of bubbles, and those bubbles will create bumps in your finish. So paint is shaken, poly is stirred. So I can support my project. A little dirt on there. Just remember, whatever's on your project when you go to finish it is staying on your project. So try to keep the area nice and clean. So I can put a little on this, on the bottom side first. The water-based finishes don't have much of an aroma to them. So they're nice for indoors in confined surfaces, areas where you don't have great ventilation. Now, you probably can see behind me over my right shoulder, I do have a paint booth set up with a vacuum to suck out vents if I needed to spray something. However, in this case, we won't need to spray this today. Now for this, all of the finishes that I considered, just for ease of application, are brushed on finishes. Could have also used a sprayed on poly or lacquer for a real deep, smooth finish that you are sure not to get brush marks on. Lacquer is a great choice. Literally just buy the rattle can at the store. Use it up. Otherwise, you need to have really good spray equipment to spray the lacquer on. And that's a little bit of work and expense. And even I don't bother with spraying lacquer from air pressure equipment. It's just a lot of work, especially the cleanup afterwards. Not worth the effort. For the frequency I use it. If I was doing a lot of high-end furniture for money, I probably would invest. Alright, so that's done. I'm going to put that on the triangles. Now I don't have to worry about applying the finish and moving it around a lot. So now I'm just going to brush it on. Thin coats are better. Always recommend going back if you don't get a great coverage in an area. generally want to brush with the grain whenever you can. And I am just going to apply it nicely. And yeah, a little bit of a technical difficulty here. There we go. There. Alright, but we're going to rotate it anyway now. Now I'm going to do the ends, the other side. So we're going to speed through this. Nothing magical about what I'm doing. Just remember, large blobs of finish will stay large blobs of finish. So when you're finished, when you're all done, if you have large blobs and they're undesirable, you will need to go back and sand them off. Because the only way once this finish is cured to remove runs is to sand them down. So if this had been a display piece that I would have had in my house, the living room, what have you, I probably would have stopped, vacuumed the shop up, gotten rid of all the dust, wiped this down with a tack cloth or a paper towel or something that was soaked with alcohol, denatured alcohol or mineral spirits, something of that nature, to make sure that every last drop of sawdust was on it. And then I would have walked away for a day and let any dust that was airborne settle. So the air was not on my project. So that dust was not on my project from the air. And just keep working it in to get rid of any runs or blobs. Like I said, thin is best. It's a lot less work to add another coat than it is to have to sand out runs. Runs are actually quite annoying and a lot of work to sand out. You have to feather in the sanding, otherwise you end up little ridges in your finish. I will just keep working. Now, the caveat to what I told you earlier about cheap brushes, well, if it's a really fine finished item, lacquered, a display box that you're making for someone, in those cases using a brush, especially with lacquer, that's the case where you're going to want to use a fine china brush. That's going to stay together very well. Lacquer can be very sticky. There we go. Now, I'm going to put that there. So I got a little groove over there. Pick it up. The triangle's the way I want them now. Put it back down and go over it one last time. Oh, did I completely? Oh, didn't do that in yet. Depending on the size of the project, you may not finish all surfaces in one sitting. You may need to finish a surface, rotate part after the item after you're done finishing that surface. Do another surface. Obviously, larger projects can be more difficult to handle. So when you give yourself that latitude to finish one area at a time, you avoid fingerprints, you avoid all kinds of issues with messing up, things like that happening. Again, now this project is utilitarian. The purpose for my finishing on this part is only so that when I get water, waxes, other finishes, spraying on the lathe when I finish, because I do finish while the parts are turning on the lathe, spray, it doesn't affect the wood, especially the wood joint. Alright. Finish is on. And at this point you would decide how many coats you needed for an aesthetic display piece. You typically, for poly, want at least 3 coats. Lacquer, essentially the sky's the limit. You just keep finishing it until you get the end result you want. So, I am going to leave it there. My first coat, after I get a couple runs off. Wow, this really does not want to stay in these triangles. Alright. Aha. That would be a pain later, that big run off the edge. The ones on the end. We have a box. Alright, we'll be back in 2 hours to recap and see how it fits where it's installed. The great thing about the rubber gloves, I can take that off. Now I can touch things without worrying about getting finish stuck to it.